Moving along. uh, Getting into the first quarter. Um, just running down some quick news, NBA news. So if you're new to the podcast, we do our quick warm up. Then we go through our first through fourth quarter segments, and then we get into our overtime where we give our little final takes. I know James has a couple things he wanted to discuss about the Negro leagues. I wanted to talk about the state of college basketball. So we got more stuff at the end, but for right now, the biggest story in the NBA at this moment is James Harden. Um, I believe again the days are running together for me. I believe it was Wednesday the story came out about James Harden, about just an inside look at his time with the Rockets thus far. And the big takeaway that most people had was that James Harden, as we believe with most star players, he's running the ship. He's calling the shots. One of the funniest quotes from that story was when Russell Westbrook was in the bubble with him, and he was running late, and Russell Westbrook was like, "Start without him. Start without James Harden." And Mike D'Antoni was like, "No, we're gonna have to restart." And he was like, "Russell Westbrook." I can imagine Russell Westbrook like, "No, you're starting now." And that's his boy. That's his friend. So saying that about him. But as we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks, James Harden's still trying to get his way out. Um, and I guess the first question I wanted to ask you um, is this: like, what if they're going to move James Harden because they don't have to move him? He's still under contract. They don't have to move him. But if they were to move him this season or next season, who do you think is the best suitor for James Harden at this moment? And just to provide some context, thus far, obviously they're still doing negotiations. How serious they are, we really don't know. But the Heat have reportedly they're not willing to give up Duncan Robinson. And the 76ers say they're not willing to give up Ben Simmons. And the 76ers quote comes directly from Daryl Morey. So I'm taking that at face value. Um, but I just want to ask you, what team do you think is the best suitor for James Harden at this point?
I mean, I don't really want to take that Daryl Morey thing at face value because I'm pretty sure he said he didn't want to move Chris Paul, and then not too long ago he ended up out of there.
That's
But
true.
Mm.
I mean, I'm just saying. But as for the best suitor, I think if Philly, let's say down the road, Embiid and Ben aren't working together, it's the clear, obvious route. You got to take one of the two. Uh, I don't know if they do that. I don't know if they do that this season. And I think with James Harden's contract, you got plenty of time to at least see where it falls. But I do think one of the big things for James that kind of happened recently was Giannis signing the max. Because now that Giannis signs the max, you can't count on him coming to your team. Kawhi, you never know where he's going to go. So obviously, you have that in the back of your mind of like, okay, even if we get him, it'll only be for like a year or two. So now I think Harden looks a bit more appetizing to a team like the Heat because now you can actually lock in a superstar long term and not have to worry about it because now obviously Giannis is off the board. You got to try to get somebody of that caliber.
Even with the Heat, I think that I read something that like Harden and the Heat have mutual interest in each other. Does uh does James Harden understand like the Heat don't play that? All that being out of shape and whatnot, and I'm gonna get this coach fired or any of that. Like Pat Riley runs the show down there. So I mean, I find that interesting that he has interest in the Heat uh, after just all that control he's had in Houston.
I don't know if the Heat were his choice or it was the Rockets' choice. Because I know he had his initial list and then he said he was willing to expand it. But I don't know if the Heat were on that expansion list in terms of like what he was willing to do. But the ESPN published an article yesterday about the realistic teams that can make offers. Obviously, it doesn't make sense to really bring up teams that can't make offers, but the teams that were listed were the Boston Celtics, the Brooklyn Nets, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Chicago Bulls, the Denver Nuggets, and the Golden State Warriors, I believe. And the Brooklyn Nets obviously are considered in there. in the 76ers and the Heat, as we all mentioned. But for me, when I look at it, I also have to consider what they're giving up to get him, because there's no point in him going there if he's not going to have anybody to play with. And he said that he wanted to win a championship. And I think it has to be in the middle of where you have a Heat situation where they're telling you what to do, which I don't think throwing him into that is good for James Harden, because it's just too much of a dichotomy between the Rockets and the Heat. But I think you can ease him into something, possibly with the Warriors, depending on how much they're willing to give. Because I think that's a good enough culture where they can bring him in, give him the leeway he wants to a degree, but still be able to bring him in. Because I feel like Steve Kerr has a system in place where he allows you to do what you want to do, but there are lines. And I think that has to be drawn there. I think the only person that doesn't really have a line so much with Steve Kerr is Draymond Green. But even he kind of understands what is and what isn't. Even with the scenario with Kevin Durant where they were arguing with the sidelines, there were certain lines you just can't cross. I think if he goes to Brooklyn, that's a mess waiting to happen. The Bucks, I don't know how the Bucks would even make that happen. And then the Bulls, he'd just be disappointed.
I mean, I think if he keeps on playing, he could get stuck in Chicago. And, you know, I mean, that sounds like Billy Donovan's worst nightmare. But I mean, he could get stuck in Chicago, and then what? You know what I'm saying? But I think, you know, with all that, you know, with Golden State, they play defense in Golden State too. So, you know, it's a lot of different stuff that, you know, Harden's going to have to adjust if he really wants to win the championship, which I don't know. I mean, I think, you know, a good point was made that, you know, we can't with James Harden, like, you know, coming back, and then he doesn't have any leverage in Houston anymore. So I mean, his teammates are kind of not listening to what he has to say. So
Yeah, I mean, also a little knock on the Golden State thing too. Like, there's a lot of off-ball in Golden State. Like, obviously, Stephen Curry's going to do his thing. That was a big thing why Kevin Durant fit so well, is because he was willing to be like the third option on a night if Clay was going off and Curry being Curry. I don't know if Harden can do that because, well, we saw him with Chris Paul and Russell Westbrook. He loves the ball in his hand. It's part of the reason why him and Westbrook never really clicked the way that we thought they would. Now, Harden was still great, but obviously there was another level they could have took it to. And because of their sort of inability to play off ball, both him and Westbrook, it just never got to that level. Another team I think that should be brought in the conversation, though, Masai Ujiri loves making those big blockbuster moves, and after Pascal Siakam kind of sputtered out in the playoffs, Toronto could be a realistic possibility if they don't think they can make it out of the East with what they got now.
yeah, I can see that. Because I think the contracts line up, right, with because they gave Siakam that extension, right?
Gave him the max, yep.
Yeah, they gave him the max. So yeah, I mean, if you could get Siakam plus, but do they have picks from the I'm sorry, the Kawhi Leonard trade? Because didn't they give up some picks, or was it just Danny Green or whatever? I don't remember if they had picks or not, but yeah, I mean, I could see Toronto definitely.
Yeah.
So for the trade, it looks like it was, I'm reading this straight from NBA.com. The Raptors have agreed to trade DeMar DeRozan, Jacob Peltz, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and a 2019 first-round pick to the San Antonio Spurs in exchange for Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green.
Oh.
Oh, okay, yeah, they didn't give up any picks. Okay, yeah, they have all their picks, so yeah, I can see Toronto doing that, yeah, for sure. And that gives them a little bit better. I think that gives them a better shot to make it out the East than Pascal Siakam does. And I like Pascal's game. He improves every year, but you know, I think he's definitely not James Harden at this point. So.
Just before we go to the next story, just to throw out the Bulls' worst case scenario for James Harden. Off the table is Garrett Temple and Denzel Valentine. Don't ask me why they're off the table in the James Harden trade, but they're off the table. They also own all of their first round picks going through 2027. And the tradable contracts include Otto Porter Jr., Zach LaVine, Thaddeus Young, Patrick Williams, Lauri Markkanen, and Kobe White.
Man.
So Kobe and Lauri are on the table, but you can't touch Garrett Temple. That's what you're telling me right now?
I think it's listed as a signing restriction for both. So
okay.
I'm guessing do they have a no? I don't know if they could demand a no trade clause. But who can demand a no trade clause in Chicago? I have no clue.
But I mean,